Hi, I'm Brian Gardner, and welcome to Speedball's how-to series on screen printing. In this third video, we're going to talk about the more complex way of making a screen print, and it's really the most popular way of getting your image on the screen. And for this, we're going to use Speedball's photographic emulsion. It's a diazo process. So when we look at this liquid, we see that it's kind of baby blue, and we need to sensitize this liquid with diazo. So a lot of folks, when they open up their kit, they think that this bottle is completely empty and there's nothing in it. It is very, very light in weight, but it does contain a light-sensitive material that will sensitize the photo emulsion to be then screened or coated on your screen. So what we're going to do is follow the directions on this. We're actually going to put H2O or water in this little jar, and we want to fill it halfway up. So when you have that bottle filled about halfway up, about right there, you're going to secure the top back onto the diazo, and you're actually going to shake this up for a couple minutes. And shaking it up is going to liquefy the oil that's in here, and we're going to add it to the base, and we're going to mix that very, very well. And that's extremely important in this process. The diazo will actually last quite a while. You can put it in the refrigerator up to 4 months. And I do recommend before you're actually using it on your screen that you bring it back up to room temperature. So the great thing about this emulsion is that you can actually do it in any kind of lighting. Ambient light from the room is not going to take away the sensitivity towards the diazo. And we're going to add the sensitizer to the bottle, and then with the small stick, gradually stir this up from the bottom up, and you're going to see that it's going to turn from that baby blue to sort of a lime green color. And so after we've been stirring this for a couple minutes, you're going to see that that blue photo emulsion actually turns sort of a light green. And that's a perfect indicator that it's been sensitized. You can see that I've been very, very careful not to get anything on my hands. If you're not an extremely careful or clean person, I would highly recommend you wear some sort of protective glove, whether it's latex or nitrile gloves. It will protect your hands from any kind of emulsion or anything that you're getting on your hands. So after that's mixed up, you're going to get your squeegee from your kit, and you're going to use that to pull a very thin bead of photo emulsion across your screen. And we're going to do that right now. So I'm going to open this bottle, and I like to have a couple things handy before I do that. One is maybe a stiff piece of mat board or card stock, and that will enable you to kind of clean up any excess photo emulsion. The key is to try to keep everything nice and lean. You don't want to put too much emulsion on there because it just won't be a successful project if it's too thick. So you can see what I'm going to do is put a thin bead on the screen. You can see I'm doing it on the substrate side. I want to make sure I have enough that I can try to get this in one pull. And you can see I'm lifting up this screen, and I like to get it maybe like a 45-degree angle, as well as this squeegee. And I'm going to pull and coat that screen. I'm going to lift this squeegee up, let me lean it against that, and I'm going to get this cardstock and actually bring any kind of excess emulsion. I'm going to kind of go around, and I'm going to get some excess off on that paper towel. And you can see I just don't want a lot of puddles on my screen. If you can, try to save some of this emulsion because it does go a long way and you don't want to trash it. What I'm going to do is take this cardstock and actually come back across briskly with a little bit of pressure, and I want to turn the screen over, and now I want to coat it again. And what I'm doing is really just getting excess emulsion off of this screen. You have a little bit of play time here, so don't be in too much of a hurry. And we want to make sure that there's just not a lot of emulsion on there. Meaning that if it looks really kind of watery or glossy, you want to make sure that that is squeegeed off your screen. And now it's ready to be dry. And what I would recommend that you actually take your screen and put it in a cupboard underneath your bathroom sink, in an oven that's not on, and in a dark place that the screen and the emulsion are actually going to dry in a dark place. When it is completely dry, you're ready to expose. And what are you going to expose? In this instance, we have our artwork, which has been printed via inkjet on a transparency. And we look at this transparency and we realize that it is nice and dark, meaning that if it was sort of gray or printed in another color, it will not be strong enough to withstand the light that we are going to expose the screen with. So make sure your film is completely dense and black, and you're going to have much more success doing that. So after you get your artwork ready, my screen is just wrapped up in a black t-shirt to keep it away from any kind of light. And just to reiterate, you can coat your screen in ambient light, but you want it to dry in a dark space. After it is dry, I'd roughly give it maybe an hour, hour and a half to make sure it's entirely cured and dry. So one great resource is the Speedball screen printing booklet that has all the instructions for all three of these processes. So if you have a question, please refer to those. They have great images and really easy, simple directions. And within this pamphlet, you'll see that there is a guideline, depending how big your screen is, how far away your light should be from your screen when you expose it. So it could be low or it could be very high. In this instance, we are using a 10 by 14 inch screen, and that dedicated area is roughly anywhere from 14 to 16 inches, should be the edge of your bulb to your screen. When we do kind of open this screen up and put it down for exposure, one thing we do want to put down is a black sheet that is going to diffuse any kind of light that's coming down. It's going to keep it from reflecting back up onto the screen. And this is in your kit, and that's what that sheet of paper is for. And I'm going to take my screen out of this t-shirt, and I'm going to place it right on top of that black sheet. And what I want to do now is put my design down on top of that. And what I'd really like to do is to put the emulsion side, I don't want to confuse you, but the part that's been printed with the inkjet printer actually should make contact with your screen. You don't want any gaps. So that means that this film is a certain thickness. Light could actually travel through here and get diffused and not give you a clean image area. So I'm going to put my artwork down on the screen. And then I want to use a piece of glass. And this piece of glass is actually going to put a little bit of weight on the artwork. So it's going to really make good contact from my screen and my artwork. And so that's why I'm putting this glass down. You can use plexiglass or regular glass. Just make sure it's not UV protecting plastic or glass, because the light simply will not pass through it. So I have that piece of glass, and it's putting weight on the artwork and making really good contact with my screen. And now I'm ready to expose. So the exposure is going to be 8 minutes for this specific height. And so I'm going to let this expose for 8 minutes. And what's happening during this exposure, it's hardening the light-sensitive photo emulsion that we squeegeed on the screen. So that means when we wash this out with water, it's not going to affect the emulsion that's hardened. It's only going to affect the emulsion where the artwork is. So since light cannot pass through your artwork or the inkjet ink, it's going to make it pliable or not cured. And that means it will wash out with water, opening your screen, allowing ink to pass through it so your design can then be printed. So after the exposure, we're going to take off that make ready or the little kind of film sandwich that we just made. We're going to take off that glass or plexiglass, whatever you put on there to make that contact happen. And then we're going to take off the artwork. And when we take off the artwork, you're going to be able to see a slight image of your artwork. And that is the emulsion that was not exposed. So it's going to stay light in color. And that is what's actually going to wash out. So the darker green emulsion is just letting you know that it's hardened. It's not going to go anywhere. So we're going to take this over to the sink and wash it out. And we're going to put the cold water on. And ultimately, if you had a small little nozzle, that would be the easiest thing to wash this out with. This sink does not have one. So we're just basically going to use a sponge and very lightly go over the image. And what we're attempting to do is to wash out the uncured emulsion that's on the screen, meaning whatever the light did not hit will still be able to be washed out. I'm kind of going in circular motions. I'm making sure I wash out the entire screen in the image. I'm not just working one area. And you don't want to do it very hard either. In fact, the emulsion is actually washing away with just the pressure of the water. And so I really don't have to scrub. One thing that you might run into is either underexposure or overexposure with photographic emulsion. If you underexpose it, that pretty much means your photo emulsion has not been exposed long enough. Meaning that at this stage, when we wash the artwork off the screen, if the emulsion starts to come off in unwanted places, it means it didn't have time to harden in the ultraviolet light. And by contrast, if we did it too long, that means the light could actually penetrate your artwork and then harden your emulsion where you actually desire it. So a perfect exposure is one that will wash out your image area and your emulsion stays on. And that's what we have right now. So this is the base unit for the all-in-one kit. It's really handy. And after you put the hinges on and put the pin back in, it really makes a sweet little hinged system that you can register your prints, whether they're on paper or t-shirts. So I do want to make sure that there's no pinholes or anything like that in the screen, meaning there's no unwanted open areas in the screen. If there are, use the screen filler and a brush to touch up any little pinholes or any kind of marks that you think that the ink will travel through the screen and get on to the substrate that you don't want to. So right now, I'm gonna kind of use this registration system that is probably the easiest to work with, and that is just using tape to mark the edges of your paper. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of picking up the screen and dropping it until I get my paper exactly where I want it to go. And if I'm going to print several of these, I don't want to have to do this to each and every single print. So what I'm going to do is actually tape the edges of my paper, meaning I'm going to put the straight edge of a piece of tape on the bottom left corner, and then on the right corner, I'm just going to lay down a straight piece of tape at the bottom. And so that means whenever I get a new sheet of paper, I can very quickly eyeball this, bring it down to those areas, and this is going to be printed in the exact same space every single time. What's really cool about the base unit in the all-in-one kit is it actually has a kickstand which holds the screen up, enabling you to handle paper and keep the screen elevated from the surface. So it's a little piece of particle board that's held together with a screw, and it's really, really handy when you're printing. And like I say, it enables you to be kind of hands-free from holding up the screen while you put down a new sheet of paper. So I'm going to keep the screen up now, and I'm actually going to talk about mixing ink. I don't necessarily want to print with red or yellow for this specific image, but I want to print an orange. And of course, these two colors make orange. So I like to add a darker color to a lighter color. And it's usually to whites, yellows, and a transparent base is what I'll put in the cup first. And then I'll slowly add the darker color to it. And I want to stir that up until I get that desired orange that I'm looking for. So right now, I have a sheet of paper that's on the base unit. It's squared up to my tape marks, and I'm going to drop my screen, and I'm just going to double check and make sure I have everything proper. What I want to do is I'm going to be pulling this squeegee from the top of the screen all the way to the bottom. And sometimes coming all the way to the bottom, you might get ink kind of in between the screen and the wood frame. And you don't want to get that on your substrate, whatever you're printing on. So I like to cover those areas a little bit. And I like to put tape on here. This blue painter's tape works fine. And I'm putting half of the tape on the screen and the other half on the piece of wood, creating a little barrier there so ink can't get through. And that's perfect. I just want to run my finger around it. A lot of times, folks will actually take the screen and put tape on the back, just to ensure any ink is not going to come through from the back. And I like to use the kind of the visual line of the tape I can see through the emulsion. So the tape that's on the back side, or the inside where the inkwell is, I can just follow that same line to make sure that it's nice and clean. I'm going to be using two squeegees. There are different durometers, meaning one is harder than one, and one is for paper, and one is for fabric. So it's actually a little fatter blade and a little softer to really kind of push that ink a little slower, and a little thicker layer of ink is what you want on a t-shirt. So the first time I'm going to do this, I'm going to pull a couple of impressions on paper, just so you can see me pull a squeegee and talk about like the feel and the technique that you should be looking for. A lot of this is going to be trial and error. You know, it looks simple on a video, and when you read it, it seems simple, but when you actually implicate whatever you're doing, sometimes it's a little trickier than you think. But with a little bit of practice and troubleshooting, you should be fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this ink and actually pour a fairly liberal bead of ink down on my screen to be printed. And I just want to even this bead of ink out. And you can see I've tried to stay off of my image area with the ink, and I've left plenty of room around the image. And what that means is that, you know, your squeegee is only so wide and your screen is only so wide. If your impression went all the way to the edge, it would be almost impossible to put down a bead of ink, then pull it all the way across and end properly. So if your image came all the way down to the end, you really need that clearance past the image to stop that motion of that squeegee. So that means keep your image within 2 inches of the screen's edge would be the perfect thing to do. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flood the screen, meaning I'm going to pull the ink across the image and not print it on anything. So what I want to do is just flood my screen with ink one time before I go to good paper. I always encourage people to print on newsprint or newspaper or something that's not that meaningful to you, to make sure that your design is exactly how you like it and it's centered and all that stuff and your registration is good. I'm using fine art paper. This is Arnhem paper by Speedball that I'm going to be printing on. And it's a really good substrate. It's a very good paper. It doesn't buckle under the water-based ink, where some papers, if they're thin or it's a commercial paper, sometimes they will completely buckle after they're dry. So this has enough cotton in it, and it's a good heavyweight paper. So I'm going to flood the screen. I'm actually going to pick it up above the paper line. I'm going to pull some ink across the image. And now I'm going to drop it on my paper. Make sure you have your paper under there. A lot of people get really excited about printing and they forget that they didn't put paper on there and they end up printing on their base unit. And so right now I'm going to take the squeegee at a 45 to 60 degree angle, and I want to make sure that blade is at a really good angle where you get a nice crisp pull. And with moderate speed and a couple pounds of pressure, I'm going to pull that ink across, and it's going to stick to the ink's going to stick to the substrate of the paper. And so right after I pulled, I hadn't even looked at my impression yet. I flooded that screen, and that flood is basically picking up this screen, angling your squeegee the opposite way, and pulling it lightly over. And what that does is fills your mesh with ink, so your mesh does not dry out. And of course, you know, there's our impression. So I'm going to print another image, and you can see how kind of quickly the tape registration works. And I'm going to pull this squeegee again, flood it. I'm going to put my kickstand down, and there's the impression. So the screen is taken off the base unit when it's time to wash it. If you've printed the desired prints that you need, you can just kind of pop it off the frame. It has these really nice speed changers on it, so you can take it off. If you are going to use this ink some more, I would encourage you to get any excess ink off the screen and not waste any. And take this to a sink and wash out the ink. If you are done printing not only this impression on t-shirts or paper, but if you're actually done with this entire design and you'd like to reclaim your screen, or basically that means you want to make it brand new again so you can use it again. We're going to talk about how to remove the photo emulsion from the screen and reclaim it with emulsion remover. So now we're going to remove your photo emulsion off of your screen. And to do this, I like to place this in this sink. If you're at home and you have a tub or a double sink in your kitchen, it's going to be a perfect space for it. What I'm going to do is coat the emulsion remover on both sides of the screen and kind of massage it into the screen and the mesh. And I'm going to let that sit for 3 to 5 minutes while it does its job. You don't need an exorbitant amount of it, just really enough to coat that screen. The earlier you do this, the better. Meaning that if you know you're not going to be printing a particular image ever again and want to remove this, it's better to do it after you've printed rather than wait a month or two, because it gets more and more difficult to get off the longer the emulsion's been on there. So right now I'm just going to let that sit. You can see it didn't take much. I'm actually visually seeing the emulsion remove itself now, but I am going to wait 3 to 5 minutes and then continue scrubbing and hitting it with water, which will take care of the rest of the job. So returning to the screen after about 5 minutes, and you can see that that emulsion is almost entirely gone from the screen, just from that gentle scrubbing. And I'm going to kind of scrub it a little bit on both sides and really kind of get into that mesh. If you have any troublesome areas, basically like this little drop here, I would really encourage you to don't use too much force on your screen because you don't want to pop a hole in it. But if you can kind of sort of scrub it a little bit, you'll see that it'll kind of pop off here. And any kind of really thick areas, you just might want to put a little bit more of the remover on there and just wait a couple minutes longer. But for the most time, that one application and scrubbing of that screen will be enough to get that emulsion kind of clear and off. The most important thing is you do make sure that the mesh is completely clear and it's not clogged of either A, ink from printing, or B, any residual emulsion. You want to make sure it's off at this point. So you can see right here, there's a little bit of emulsion that got a little thick, probably during my application. I'm not too concerned about it because it's at the very edge of the frame, and it's very unlikely that I'm going to be printing that far over. But if I was really ultra concerned about it, I'd put a little bit more remover on there, let it wait 5 minutes, and then boom, hit it with the brush and it will come off. So you all just keep in mind that everything I've gone over today is explicitly shown in this Speedball instruction manual that comes in every single kit. As well as going to speedballart.com. All the instructions, all the graphics, all the directions to every single process is written down. Really neat, simple steps. So good luck and happy printing.